So in the previous session, we have discussed about iterative statements, and we have discussed what exactly an iterative statement and what is the use, what iterative statements are available in Apex programming, how to use these iterative statements to execute a piece of code repeatedly till the required number of times we have discussed. And we have identified there are 4 iterative statements in Apex programming. First one, while. Second one, do while. Third one, for. Fourth one, enhanced for. These are the 4. And yesterday we have discussed 2 iterative statements like while and the do while. We have discussed in the previous session how to use them, what is the syntax, how it will execute internally. We have discussed that. Now today we'll see for iterative statement, and then we'll move forward to arrays. Now let's see. As of now, we have discussed so many use cases by using while and the do while iterative statements. When you observe the programs which we have implemented by using while and the do while, in each program there are 3 statements are very common. Okay, we have written 3 statements commonly in each and every program which we have implemented through while or do while iterative statements. Like when you observe this program here, this is the do while iterative statement. So we have defined the variable and we have initialized the variable with the respective value. We have incremented or decremented the value here. This is the second statement. And we have verified the conditions. Okay, we have prepared 3 statements here. Variable definition and initialization. And second one, increment or decrement. Third one, conditional statement. 3 statements are written in 3 different lines. When you go to my previous program also, here also, we have defined the variables and initialized the variables. And then we have written this conditional statement. We have incremented or decremented the value. 3 statements common. I'm going back to one more program. Here also, variable definition and initialization, conditional part, increment or decremental part. When I go back to one more program, here also variable definition and initialization is common, condition, increment. That means in each and every program, whatever we have implemented by using while and the do while iterative statement, in this program, so 3 statements are commonly available. Defining the variables and initializing the variables with the respective values. This is in separate line. Incrementing or decrementing the variable values in a separate statement. And then checking the conditions in separate statements. So these statements we have written, 3 separate lines of code we have prepared. Now, in this case, suppose for example, here we have defined one variable. We have incremented or decremented the value for one variable. Suppose I want to define more number of variables. I want to initialize more number of variables. I want to increment more number of variables. I want to decrement more number of variables. In that case, okay, if the number of variables are more, automatically number of lines of code will be increased automatically here. So now here in this case, instead of writing that much of lengthy code, we can able to make it optimized. We can reduce those lines of code by combining these 3 statements into a single line. That means defining the variables and initializing the variables, checking the conditions, incrementing or decrementing the values of the variable. Instead of writing these 3 statements in 3 different lines, we can combine these 3 statements into a single line so that we can reduce the number of lines of code we can reduce the compilation time and we can reduce the execution time so that we can increase application performance. So for that reason, in order to implement this kind of functionality, in order to reduce the number of lines of code, we are using the help of for iterative statement. We are using for iterative statement. So then how this for iterative statement will look like? How can we combine the variable definition and initialization conditions, increment or decrementing the values within a single line? Now let's see. And once the code has been prepared, how it will execute? What is the execution flow in for iterative statement? We'll see once. Then we will see how to implement these functionalities. Now let's see. As part of this for iterative statement, the syntax will look like this. Let me explain the syntax. We have to use for, and then we can have a block to write the required business logic. Whatever the statements you want to execute, write those statements inside the block. And then in this for loop, we can specify the three parts. So now we need to specify the variable definition and initialization over here. Now this is the initialization part. Initialization part, we can define and initialize the variables and then give a semicolon to indicate, okay, with this one, initialization part is completed here. Now, next one, we can specify the conditions part. Whatever the conditions you want to verify, it may be one or it may be multiple. We can able to write these multiple conditions with the help of logical operators by using inside this conditions part. And then we can specify increment or decremental part. Increment or decremental part. In this place, we can able to write the code to increment the values or to decrement the values depends upon the requirement. Based on the requirement, we can increment or decrement the values also. These are the three parts are available. We have initialization part and then conditions part and increment or decremental part also available here. These are the three parts are available over here. So now each and every part will be separated by using semicolon. Semicolon is indicating this is the end of this particular initialization part or conditions part. Okay, now, so this is the syntax we used to follow as part of this for iterative statement. Okay, clear up to this one? Next. So now here in this case, how the execution flow will happen in for iterative statement. What exactly the execution flow? Now let's see. So as part of this for iterative statement, before this for loop, we might have so many other statements also. As part of this program, we might have written so many other statements also, like as if conditions also, system.debug statements also, switch statements also, so much okay, other lines of code we might have written over here. Now, in this case, it will be executing that piece of code one by one, one by one, one by one like that. At a certain point of time, it is reaching to, okay, for the iterative statement. As part of this for iterative statement, first of all, it will execute initialization part. Whatever the initialization part that we have, it will execute that initialization part. That means, first of all, it will be defining the variables and initializing the variables with the respective values. Because Apex is purely tightly coupled programming language, where variable definitions are must and should. First of all, we have to define the variables, then only we can use those variables as part of your implementation. So we can't use the variable without definition. We have to define them first, then only we can use. So that variable definitions and initialization part will be executed first. That is the step one. As a step one, first of all, it will execute the initialization part where it will define and initialize the variables with the respective values. Now, initializing means what? Assigning the values. Now, once the initialization part has been completed, then it will go to the conditions part. As a step two, it will check the conditions. Whatever the conditions that you have prepared, those conditions will be getting verified. Okay. Whatever the conditions we have prepared, those conditions will be getting verified. Now, so whatever the conditions we have specified, the conditions will be getting verified over here. Here there are two possible results. Conditions may be satisfied, conditions may be failed. In that case, if the conditions are satisfied, it will enter into the block. If the conditions are satisfied, it will enter into the block here. This is the third step. When if the conditions are true, whatever the conditions we have prepared, if the conditions are satisfied, it will enter into the block. So once it has been entered into the block, whatever the statements that you are written, those statements will be executing once. This is the fourth step. So once the conditions has been satisfied, it will execute the statements. Whatever the statements we have written inside this particular block, those statements will be executing once, only one time, not multiple times. So once the statements has been executed once, if there is no more statements are available to execute in the block, it has been reached to last of the block over here, no more statements are available to execute. Then in this case here, it will go back to increment or decremental part. It will go back to increment or decremental part. This is a step 5. So now once the statements has been executed, then it will be incrementing the value or decrementing the values. Once the increment or decrement has been getting validated, that means if it is done, then again it will check the condition. Again, it will check the condition here. To check boss, already we have executed the statements once. Now the value has been incremented. You want me to execute the statement second time or not? To check it out, it will check the conditions again. If the conditions are valid, that means satisfied, again it will enter into the block, it will execute the statements one more time. Then it will go back to increment or decremental part. It will be incrementing the value or decrementing the value. Again, it will check the conditions. If the conditions are satisfied again, then it will execute the piece of code. So this process will be keep on continued till the conditions get satisfied. Once the conditions get failed, it will comes out of the block automatically here. Here's the seventh step. Once the conditions get failed, it will comes out of the block automatically. Okay, this is the flow of execution of for iterative step. Clear? Now, so now tell me in this case here, is this for loop is a pre-checking iterative statement or post-checking iterative statement? How do you know pre-checking?
Pre-checking.
Right. Every time before executing these statements, first of all, it is checking the conditions. Once the conditions are satisfied, then only it will enter into the block, it will execute the statements. So, for loop is one of the pre-checking iterative statement which is used to execute a piece of code repeatedly till the required number of times. Then what is the speciality of for loop? Because we have while loop, we are having do while. Then what is the speciality? For loop provides an optimized way of writing iterative statements. That means do while also by using while statement we can do. By using that do while also we can execute that statement. But when coming to the for loop, it provides an optimized mechanism. That means we can reduce the number of lines of code. So we can able to combine the variable definitions and initialization, conditions, and the incrementing or decrementing these values, everything we can able to combine into a single line so that we can reduce the number of lines of code. If the number of lines of code is reduced, then compilation time will reduce, execution time will reduce. Automatically, it will improve your application performance. Okay, so for that reason here, for loop is the best mechanism. It's an optimized mechanism that we have in iterative statement. So that here we are using for loop in so many places in real-time implementations. Okay, in very rare cases we'll use while and the do while. In so many places we are using for iterative statement. Now, when you go to the real-time implementations, in 80% of the cases we will use enhanced for loop. 80% of the cases will use enhanced for loop. In remaining 20% we are using normal for loop. Okay, 80% will be enhanced for loop, 20% will be normal for loop. Okay, so for loop is very very important as part of your iterative statements in Apex program. Clear? Now make a note of this one. Let me give you the syntax first. For initialization part, conditions part, and increment or decremental part. Here we can write the statements. Whatever the statements that you want, you can specify. Now, for is a pre-checking iterative statement which will execute a block of statements repeatedly till the required number of times. For loop provides an optimized way of using iterative statements. For loop provides an optimized way of using iterative statements. Then how can we use this for iterative statement? We'll see with a practical use case. Now I would like to implement a small use case like this. Whatever the programs we have implemented through while and the do while, same programs we can do with the help of for iterative statement as well.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in initialization, we can initialize more than one variable.
Yes, right.
Okay, sir.
Done with this? Now, let's see. So now tell me, as part of this use case, I would like to generate a mathematical table for the given number. So whatever the number that I'm going to supply, for that number, I want to generate mathematical table. Yesterday we did this use case by using while, but now I would like to do the same use case by using for iterative statement. So then we can see the difference of the number of lines of code. Now let's see. Now tell me, as part of this program, how many variables we need to define? Two variables here.
Two
The
variables.
first variable is used to store the number for which we need to generate the mathematical table. It's a fixed number. And the second variable is used to store the counter value, which will be starting from 1. It will keep on incrementing the value till it is reaching to 10. So now I want to define two variables here of type integer. For one variable, I want to assign a number for which you want to generate the mathematical table. The second variable will be a counter variable, which should be initialized with 1. Now, let's see how can we do this one here. I'm going to my Salesforce org now. I'm going to my Salesforce org. I'm going to the execute anonymous window. Go to the developer console. Go to the execute anonymous window. I'm defining the for iterative statement here. In this for loop, I would like to define the two variables and I would like to initialize. Integer max number, I'm giving some 89, comma, counter variable should be initialized with 1. So two variables we need to define and initialize. So inside the for loop, I'm defining two variables over here. Max number that has been initialized with the value 89 and the counter variable which should be initialized with the value 1. So now with this one, okay, I'm done with that initialization part. Now I would like to execute this piece of code till the counter value is reaching to 10. So that I'm checking the conditions counter less than or equals to 10. Now, every time counter should be incremented by 1. Each time the counter value should be incrementing by 1. So now I would like to execute this piece of code. So now system.debug, I want to print the max number. I'm giving a space and then star because I would like to generate this a format. This is a format I want. So now in order to generate this format, we are using this. We are representing the max number, that means a variable for which you want to generate the mathematical table and a space, and then we are having star. Then we would like to specify that number with which you would like to multiply. That is nothing but counter variable. Plus, that means concatenating. Here we have a space and then equality symbol here. I'm indicating space, equality symbol, and then I'm concatenating. Then now we are getting this value. How can we get this value? By multiplying these two numbers over here. So I'm using braces. Now I would like to specify max number into counter. Max number into counter. That's it. Over. Only two lines. Within two lines, we can able to complete that program also here. So now we no need to increment because already we are done with this particular part. So just by using these two lines of code, we can complete this program. If it is a while or do while, we need to write some 4 to 5 lines of code. But here we can finish it up within 2 lines. So that here we can define the variables and initialize the variables and then checking the conditions, incrementing or decrementing the values within one single line so that we can reduce the number of lines of code. Clear? Now click on execute. My request has been sent to the server. Select the debug only checkbox. Now it is generating the mathematical table for the number 89. So whatever the number that we have specified, for that number it will generate that mathematical table. If I'm giving the number as 1476, then it will generate the mathematical table for the number 1476. Select the debug only checkbox. It will generate the mathematical table for the number. Clear? So this is how we can able to prepare for iterative statement, and this is the execution flow of for iterative statement. Okay. Next.
Sir, in this case, we can take a max number the 50 also.
Yes, you can take anything. Done with this? Next. Now, so now let's see one more new feature as part of Apex programming, that is arrays. So we have to understand what exactly an array and what it contains, what is the use of arrays, how to define arrays in Apex programming, what is the syntax we used to follow. Upon defining an array by using a specific syntax, what will happen behind the screen, how the memory will be getting reserved, how it will recognize each and every element available inside that array, how to manage the elements in the array, how to add the elements, how to get the elements, how to iterate the array from starting to ending, ending to starting. That means reverse format also. We'll see practically here. Okay, now. So now tell
Sir,
me,
what about
what do you mean by
enhanced
an
code?
array? What do you mean by an array? What did you understood with this word?
Collection of data.
Okay, collection of elements having same data type here. Okay, right. That means whenever if you want to store a group of element, okay, a group of elements of homogeneous type. Homogeneous means what? Same type of elements here. Similar data type of element. That means all may be integer, all may be string, all may be decimal, all may be ID. It may be anything. All the elements will be of same data type over here. So in this case, if you want to store a collection of elements of homogeneous type, we are using arrays. Now, Here you can raise a question, sir, why should we go for arrays? Already we have defined some variables as of now. We have stored some values also inside that. Then what is the speciality of this array? Now let's see. For example, assume that I'm defining a variable. For example, I'm defining a variable. Integer customer code. I'm defining a variable with the name customer code, which is of type integer. Now tell me what this statement indicates. This statement will inform to the Apex compiler, dear compiler, user has defined a variable with the name customer code, which is of type integer. So please reserve 4 bytes of memory for this variable and assign the memory location to this variable, and in that memory store the default value as null. Okay, now this is the meaning of this statement. So now in this case, this statement will be informing to the Apex compiler, dear compiler, user has defined a variable with the name customer code, which is of type integer, which will store one integer value inside that. So to store the integer value, how much memory will be required? 4 bytes. Okay, there is a fixed size. For integer variable, we have fixed sizes available 4 bytes. So please reserve 4 bytes of memory and allocate this memory location to that variable. And in that particular memory location, store the default value as null. Why? I haven't assigned any value for this variable. If the user did not assign any value for the variable, what is the default value will be storing by Salesforce? Null. So now please store the value null. So now for that reason here, Apex compiler is going to be reserving 4 bytes of memory. It will reserve 4 bytes of memory. Assume that this is 4 bytes. This is 4 bytes of memory. Now this memory has been pointed to this variable. Whatever the memory has been defined, this memory will be pointing to this variable here. Now in this memory, what value it will store by default? Null. It will store the value null because we haven't assigned any value for this variable, just we have defined the variable over here. So it will be allocating the memory, it will be storing the default value as null. Now, in future, okay, as part of my program, if I'm using this variable by assigning some value, then fine. Suppose if I'm not using this variable anywhere in my program, this 4 bytes of memory will be waste. Okay, this 4 bytes of memory will be waste. Okay, now in this case, for example, later after writing some piece of code, now I'm assigning some value for the variable. I'm assigning customer code equals to 4570087. I'm assigning the value here. Now tell me what is the meaning of this statement now? What is the meaning of this statement here? Now, right. In this case here, it will be informing to the Apex compiler, dear compiler, user has assigned the value with the number 4570087 for the variable customer code. So please store this value in the memory location reserved for the variable. For the customer code variable, whatever the memory has been reserved in that memory location, store this value 4570087. Now in this case, immediately Apex compiler is going to be collecting this value over here. This value will be storing inside that memory location. Whatever the 4 bytes of memory has been reserved in that memory, it will store. But already it is having the null value, right? What about that null value? That null value will be replacing with new value, whatever we have assigned. Clear? Now, next. Later, after writing few more lines of code, I'm assigning one more value for the same variable. Customer code equals to 98 00021. This is the customer code value we have assigned. Then what is the meaning of this statement now? Store this value 0 to 1 inside the memory location reserved for customer code variable. Now in this case, it will collect this value. Now, but already this variable is having some value, right? Then what about that value? That value will be replacing. Okay, that value will be replaced with new value. That means what? What we have observed, a variable can hold how many values at a time? Only one. Okay, the normal variable can hold only one value at a time. When you assign a new value, previous value will be lost. Now the new value will occupy that memory space. In future, if you are assigning a different value for the variable, then previous value will be erased. Now new value will occupy the memory space because a normal variable can store only one value at a time. Okay, understood the concept now? Now, in this case, I have 10 customer codes are available. I have 10 customer codes are available. How to store them? I have 10 different customer codes are available. How to store them? In that case, what we need to do? We need to define 10 different variables. I have 100 customer codes. How many variables you need to define? 100 variables. I have millions of customers, millions of customer codes. What can I do? You want me to define millions of lines of code to define only just for the variables? No, I don't want to do that. In that case, the number of lines of code will be keep on increasing. It will occupy more characters also. It will take more time for compilation. It will take more time for execution. So for that reason, I don't want to define these many number of variables. Whatever the customer codes that we have, it may be 1, it may be 10, it may be 100 or 1000 or 1 lakh or 1 crore. All these customer codes I want to store into single variable itself. Within a single variable, I would like to store multiple values. In that case, if you want to store a collection of elements, if you want to store a group of values within a single variable, then we have to use the help of a feature called as arrays. Okay, understand the concept here, why we are going for arrays? In arrays also, we have some limitations. When moving forward, we'll go for one more extension as well. Okay, now we'll see that part in later. Now in this case, let's see. So now in this case here, when coming to that arrays, how can we define? Array contains a collection of elements of homogeneous type. That means we can store multiple values within a single variable. Now, in that case, upon storing the multiple values within a single variable, there is a condition all the values will be of same data type. Whatever the values we are going to store, all the values will be of same data type. If you are having different types of values, like as 4 integer, 2 double, 4 decimal, okay, 5 IDs, and then 1 decimal, 1 date, and then 4 string. If we are having some different types of values, it won't support. Arrays will support to store only homogeneous elements. Okay, only homogeneous elements. It won't support to store heterogeneous elements. Okay, clear up to this one? Now, then how many elements we can store? It's your choice. Depends upon the requirement here. If you want to store one element or two elements, 5, 10, 100, 1000, 1 lakh, whatever. Depends upon your requirement, we can able to define that size as well. In this case, how can we define that array? What is the syntax we used to follow in order to define an array in Apex programming? Now let me explain. Let me explain the syntax. In order to define that array, we have to follow a specific syntax. We have to specify data type and then specify square braces and an array name equals to new data type. Here we can specify the size. This is the syntax. In order to define an array, this is the syntax we used to follow. Data type and the square braces, array name equals to new data type. In the braces, we need to specify size. This is the syntax. Then what exactly is each part in the syntax indicates? Now let me explain. For example, let's come to this one here. Now in this case here, this is the array syntax. In this syntax, we are having so many parts are available. What exactly each part indicates, let me explain. The first part, data type. So now tell me this data type indicates what? Hmm. Now it is indicating what type of elements this array can store. What type of values it can store? Will it store integer values, decimal values, boolean values, string values, ID values, account type values, lead type values? What type of values it will store? To indicate what type of elements this array can store, okay, then we need to specify that data type. So to indicate what type of elements. So what type of elements can be stored inside this array to indicate that we are using this data type? This is the first part. Second part. Second part, this is square braces. This square braces is called as dimension. This is called as dimension. So what do you mean by this dimension? What it indicates? Basically, dimension is going to be indicating that. Okay, basically, dimension is going to be indicating that. So now it is informing to the Apex compiler, dear compiler, user has defined a variable here. This is the variable name. This is the data type. But this is not a normal variable to store only one value. This is an array variable which can store a collection of elements. Why? Because suppose, for example, here, assume that. Come to a scenario. If I'm taking up to this part, if I'm taking this up to this part, here I'm writing like this here. If I'm eliminating this part, then how it look like? Data type variable name. It's like as a normal variable over here. So now, but this is not a normal variable, this is an array variable to indicate that we are using these dimensions. Okay, this is the functionality of the dimensions here. So dimension will be informing to the Apex compiler, dear compiler, okay, user has defined a variable. This is the name of the variable, but this is not normal variable. This is an array variable. Okay, clear? To indicate that we are using this dimensions. Now, next part. Third part. It is indicating what? Variable name. That means array name. It indicates the name of the array. So whatever the array that we are going to define, that array name will be storing inside this. Name of the array. Clear? Next one. This keyword is for what? New keyword.
New array name.
No. New keyword. New keyword will describe what? Hmm. Now this new keyword is going to be taking care of memory allocation. Now suppose for example, if I'm defining like as integer, okay, some variable name. Okay, then how much memory will be reserved? Okay, how much memory? 4 bytes. Because it's an integer data type 4 bytes. Now tell me, is it a normal variable? No, array variable here. How many elements you are going to store? Here we are indicating is a size. Like for example, I'm giving the size here. I'm giving the data type as integer. That means how many elements we can store in this one? How many elements can I store in this array now? 10 elements. I'm giving the size as, for example, I'm giving the size as 10. How many elements we can store? 10 elements. Of which data type? Integer here. Then for each integer value, how much memory is required? 4 bytes. Totally, how many variables here? 10. How much memory is required? 40 bytes of memory. Then who will do this calculation? New keyword. Okay. For that reason, here we are using this new keyword. So if you are defining a normal variable, there is a fixed size 4 bytes. But now here we are storing more number of values. How many values we are going to store? We are indicating this size over here. Based on the size, based on the data type, please calculate how much memory will be required. Isn't that much of memory here for this variable? So to indicate that, to take care of the memory allocation, we are using new keyword. Okay, now, so basically, whenever the people are from computer science background, anybody from computer science background? One person,
Yes, sir.
two
Me, sir.
members. So now here in this case here, only two members. Okay, now in this case. So now in this case, whenever we are learning this computer science, okay, there you will be having a subject called as data structures and algorithms. In data structures and algorithm, mainly they're concentrating on two things. First one, space complexity. Second one, time complexity. That means once a program has been getting prepared, once a logic has been getting prepared, once an algorithm has been prepared to execute that program, how much time it will take. To calculate that, they're using time complexity algorithm. Then upon executing that program, how much memory it will consume internally here. How many bytes of memory it will require to execute that program, to do that calculation they're using space complexity. So that here to calculate the time, like for example, whenever we are downloading any video from the internet, it will be showing some time right to you here. It is indicating that okay, 40 seconds bytes left, 40 seconds is left, or 1 minute is left. It is indicating the time. How they are doing this calculation of the time based on the speed of your internet, based on the content is getting downloaded, it will be calculating the time complexity. Okay, now, so now here in this case here also, in order to calculate that how much memory will be required, so that we are using the help of this new keyword. So that means new keyword internally having time complexity, space complexity algorithm here. Okay, now it will calculate how much memory will be required. That much of memory will be reserving by new keyword. Now it will take care of memory allocation. How much memory is required to store these values? Now that much of memory will be reserving by this new keyword. Next, the last one, size. Now this size indicates what? Number of what? Elements can store. How many elements can store here? Number of elements can store in array. That means how many number of elements you would like to store inside this array to indicate that we are using this size. So whatever the size that we have given for this array, that size will be fixed in the entire program. You can't increase the size, you can't decrease the size at runtime. No such kind of functionality over here. Okay, we can't increase, we can't decrease that size over here. That will be fixed. So now here in this case, for example, I'm giving this data type as integer. I'm giving the size as some 20. Now tell me here in this array how many elements it can store? 20 elements. Of type what? Integer here. In future here, for example, upon running the program, when you try to store the 21st element also, it won't accept. It will show the error message, list index out of bounds. That means whatever the index that you have given, that is out of range. Because already the array is full. No more elements can be accommodatable, so that here we can't store these elements. Okay, and then in future, if you want to reduce the size, it won't support, because array size will be always fixed. That's what here we can say arrays are fixed size collections. Arrays are fixed size collections. Upon defining the array, we need to indicate the size of the array, which indicates how many elements can be held inside that. Once the array size has been defined, that size cannot be grow, cannot be shrink at runtime. During the program, we can't increase, we can't decrease that size. Okay, this is the functionality of arrays. Okay, understood the concept now? Next. So now here in this case, how can we define this array over here? Now, whenever I'm defining the array, what will happen behind the screen? Now let me explain. As part of this array definition here, whenever I'm defining the array, what will happen behind the screen? Now let me explain. For example, I'm defining an array. Integer, integer, customer codes equals to new integer of 10. New integer of 10. So now here we are indicating this. Now I'm defining this array over here. Okay, I'm defining this array. So now in this case, now tell me what type of array we have defined here? Integer type. What is the array name? Customer codes. How many elements it can store? 10 elements here. What type of elements? Integer type. Right. Now in this case here, let's see. Whenever I'm going to be defining this statement here, then what it indicates, this statement will be informing to the Apex compiler, dear compiler, user has defined a variable with the name customer codes, but this is not a normal variable, this is an array variable here of type integer. Now, if which can able to store 10 elements of type integer, so please calculate the required amount of memory and reserve that much of memory for this particular array variable here. Okay. Now tell me for this array how much memory will be reserved? 40 bytes of memory here. Okay, 40 bytes. Because each integer value will occupy 4 bytes of memory, total 10 elements, 40 bytes of memory will be required. So internally the Apex compiler is going to be reserving 40 bytes of memory. Immediately Apex compiler is going to reserve 40 bytes of memory. It will reserve 40 bytes of memory. This is 40 bytes. So it is reserving 40 bytes of memory over here. Total 40 bytes of memory. Now this memory is going to be pointing to this variable. Whatever the memory has been reserved, now this memory is going to be pointing to this array variable. Okay, clear? Now, so now in this case here, once this 40 bytes of memory has been reserved, then in this 40 bytes, how many elements we can store? 10 elements here. So whatever the 40 bytes of memory is available, this 40 bytes of memory will be dividing into 10 equal partitions. Because in this 40 bytes, it will store 10 elements of type integer. Each integer variable requires 4 bytes. So based on the size, okay, because here I have given the size as 10, depends upon the size which I have given, this memory will be dividing into 10 partitions over here. Okay, it will divide the memory space into 10 equal partitions. Now this is the memory partitions over here. It will be having 10 equal partitions. Now, here we are having this two partitions over here. Here we are having two more partitions. Here we are having two more partitions. Here we are having two more partitions. Total 10 partitions. Each partition will occupy how much memory space? 4 bytes. Okay. Whatever the memory space has been allocated for this particular array, this memory space will be divided into 10 equal partitions based on the size. So now each partition will have 4 bytes of memory here. This is also 4 bytes. 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 Each partition will have the size of 4 bytes. 4 bytes of memory here. Clear? Next. So now here in this case here. So now once this particular memory has been reserved, it will dividing into various equal partitions. Then how to recognize each and every partition now? This is the first partition, second partition, third one. So to recognize each and every partition, it is going to be reserving, it is allocating one unique identification number for each and every partition, that is called as index position. For each partition, it is allocating one index position. Index position is going to be allocating for every partition through which we can recognize each and every partition, which always starts from 0. It will allocate one index position. For every partition, it is allocating one index position starting from 0. This is having 0th index position. This is the first index position. This is the second index position, third index position, and the fourth one, and the fifth index position, and the sixth index position, 7, 8, and 9. These are the 9 partitions here, 0 to 9. Okay. Now, so now here once the partitions has been allocated with the index positions, now in each partition it will store some value. Have we assigned any values for these partitions as of now? No. If you're not storing any value, what is the default value stored by Salesforce? Null. It will store the default value as null. Here also it will store the value null. Here also null. Here also null. In each and every partition, it will store the default value as null. In each partition, it will be storing the value as null. Because we haven't assigned any value, if the user did not assign any value, it will be allocating the default value as null. Now, so now here in this case, now tell me how to recognize each and every partition now. Index position here. Now, suppose for example, assume that. Now assume that today I want to visit one of my relatives' house. So they are staying in Kukatpalli. I know that apartment name. I know that apartment name. In that apartment, there are 100 flats. It's a 6 floors building here. In each floor, they're having some 13 to 14 flats. They're having 100 flats are there. I don't know in which flat they're staying there. Then how do we know? Do we need to press the calling bell for each and every flat? No. Then what can I do? Now we need to be aware of apartment name and flat number both. If you know apartment name and the flat number both, directly we can go to the apartment, we can go to the flat, we can meet the people, we can have the conversation, whatever you want. Like the similar way here also, if you want to store some value inside these partitions, then we should be aware of the apartment name also and then flat number also over here. Because all this entire 40 bytes of memory has been pointed to where? To the variable. That means array. This is nothing but my apartment name. In this apartment, we are having 10 flats are available. Each flat is having a flat number starting from 0. Now here in this case, if you want to meet any one of these people, we should be aware of the apartment name and the flat number. So that here also, if you want to recognize each and every partition, then to recognize the partition, we are using the help of both array name along with the index position. Then how can we do that? Now let's see. So in order to know this partition here, to recognize this partition, we have to use customer codes of 0. That means this is the array name and along with that index position 0. Clear? Now, so now tell me in this case, How to recognize this particular partition now? We have to specify the array name. What is the array name here? Customer codes of 1. We have to specify array name along with that partition number also here. Now to recognize this particular partition over here, I would like to use array name. Customer codes of 2. Now, in this case, to recognize this partition 4, what we have to do? We are going to be using the help of customer codes of 4. Now, to recognize this partition 6, we are using the name customer codes of 6. To recognize this partition 8, we are using that name customer codes of 8. In order to recognize this partition, last partition, we are using the help of customer codes of 9. Okay, so to recognize each and every partition, we are using the help of array name along with index position as well here. Clear? Now, in this case, if I am writing this a single line of code as part of my Apex programming, this much of functionality will be happening behind the screen. Okay, if I am writing a single line of code to define an array, this much of functionality will be happening behind the screen. So based on this array definition, depends upon the data type, depends upon the size, it is going to be calculating the required amount of memory with the help of new keyword. That much of memory will be getting reserved. Once the memory has been reserved, so now that memory will be dividing to the various partitions based on the size. Based on the array size, it will divide the memory into various equals partitions. And to recognize each and every partition, it is allocating one index position. In arrays, index positions are always starting from 0. So now in this case, by default inside these partitions, it will store the default value as null. Because we haven't assigned any values, so that it will store the default value as null. And then, to recognize each and every partition, we have to use the help of array name along with index positions. Clear? Now. So now in this case here, now as of now we have defined the array here. Now the memory space also allocated. By default it is storing null. So now do we have any chance to store our own values in these partitions? Yes. Because why I have defined this array to store my customer codes over here. But already it is storing nulls. Now I want to store the value over here. Then how can we store the values? How to assign? Now let's see. Now I would like to assign the values for these arrays. Assigning values. How to assign the values for these arrays? So for that one, we have to follow a syntax. What is the syntax? We have to specify array name along with index position equals to value. That's it. Like as a normal variable only. Suppose if you are removing this index position here, it looking like as a normal variable, right? Variable equals to value. That's it. But here this is not a normal variable, it's an array. In that array, we have multiple partitions over here, so that we are indicating partition number also. That's it, nothing else. Everything is same. Now, array name along with the index position, and then we can assign the value whatever you want here. Then how to assign these values? Now let me explain. For example, I'm assigning the values. I want to assign customer codes of 0. I want to assign 459002. This is the value here. Then what it means? Then what it means over here? Now it will be storing. That means whatever the value we have assigned 459002, this value will store where? Inside the array. That means customer code. In this array, 10 partitions are there. In which partition it will store? 0th partition. That means this is the location. In this particular location, please store this value over here. This is the meaning of this statement. Okay? Now. So now here in this case, it will be storing this value. Whenever we are assigning this value will be storing inside that partition. Now, previously it is having null. Now the value will be replacing with 459002. Clear? Now, as I'm assigning some more values. Customer codes of 1, okay, 89, okay, 566. Customer codes of 2, 90092. Customer codes of 3, 788900. Like that, here I'm assigning some value for this particular partitions. Whatever the values we have assigned, these values will be getting stored. Now inside these partitions, it will store these values. Inside these partitions, it will store these values. Now, in this partition 1, what is the value it will store now? 89566. In the index position 2, 90092. In the last one, 788900. Right. Whatever the values we have assigned, those values will be storing inside this partition. Like that, here we can able to store the elements inside your array. Clear? Understood the concept here? Once the array has been getting defined, this is how we can store the elements inside the array. That means we can assign the values for your partitions. Okay? Next. So now once the values has been stored, how can we get these values now? How to collect these values from the array? Right, exactly. Generally, suppose for example, if it is a normal variable, if you want to collect the value, then what we have to use? Simply we are using variable name. But here this is array. Along with the array name, we have to use index position also. That's it. Simple concept here. Okay, now I would like to print those element values. Now, retrieve the elements. In order to retrieve the elements, we have to follow a syntax. We have to specify array name along with index position. Array name along with index position. So now here I would like to specify. I want to print the values. System.debug. I'm indicating customer code is. I want to represent the value. Customer codes of 0. The first customer code I'm collecting over here, I'm printing this value. That means array name along with index position here. Second customer code I would like to print. System.debug. Customer code is. I would like to print the value. Customer codes of 1. System.debug. Customer code is. Customer codes
Sir,
of
we
2.
can't print the codes in a single line.
Now, here we can able to represent those element values also. Clear? If we want to print all the elements within a single row, simply we can say system.debug customer codes are, just we can give array name. Automatically all the elements will be printing in one single line over here by separating a comma. Clear? This is how we can able to deal with your arrays as part of your Apex programming. So now as part of Apex programming, we have to define the array. Once the array has been getting defined, we can able to initialize that variables, partitions with the respective values, and then we can retrieve the values also by using this functionalities. These are the features over here. Clear up to this one? Understood the concept now? Now, make a note of this one. Let me give the definitions and the notes points over here. I will give the syntax also.
Sir, what about enhanced for?
Now, that will be later. Okay, after this arrays, we'll see that. Because enhanced
Okay,
for
sir.
loop requires an array or collection mandatorily.
Okay, sir.
Sir, after writing customer code in the system.debug, the whole array will be printed, like if we are not
Yes.
mentioning the index.
Now, it
So for
no need to
example,
specify
here,
the index.
okay.
See, if you are
So for
using that
example,
system.debug, if you are writing that array name, like some customer codes, all the elements available in the array will be printed by separating a comma.
okay. So if we have only entered first, second, and third value, so only three values will be printed, or three
Yes,
values
right.
plus null, 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 something like.
Yes. No, see, if you are giving that index position, only that respective index elements will be printed. Remaining elements will not print. Now, clear up to this one? Now let's see. Let's see what exactly an array here. While storing the values inside a variable, the variable can hold only one value at a time. The variable can hold only one value at a time. If the user tries to assign a new value for the same variable, then it will replace the old value with the new value automatically. It will replace the old value with the new value automatically by default. To store the multiple values within a single variable, we have to use the help of arrays. We have to use the help of arrays. Arrays allows us to store a collection of homogeneous elements. That is, we can store same data type elements inside the array, but it won't support to store different types of elements inside it. Now, by using arrays, we can reduce the number of variable definitions in the application. Now, syntax. We have to specify the data type and then array name equals to new data type and the size. Now, note, while defining the array, we have to specify the array size, which indicates the number of elements can be held inside the array. Array size can't be grow or shrink at runtime. That is, arrays are fixed size collections. Done up to this part? Done up to this syntax? Next. Now, this array can store 50 elements, maximum of 50 string elements inside it. ID. Record ID is equals to new ID array. Now this array can store maximum of 25 record IDs. Account array. New account of 20. Now this particular array can store maximum of 20 account records. That means each element is nothing but one account record. Done up to this part? Now, position underscore underscore C array. Position records equals to new position underscore underscore C of 10. Now this array can store 10 position records. Now, once the array has been defined, then it will divide the memory to various partitions based on the array size. Each partition can be recognized by using an index position starting from 0. These are the records. Okay, account is a subject data type which can store one account record. To store multiple account records, I'm defining account array here. Each element is one complete account record. First account record will be one element, second account record will be another element, third account record will be another element. Like that, 10 records, 20 records we can store inside that. Right, right. Because not only storing single values, I want to store records also. In that case, we can go with arrays. Right, inside that array, we can store inside this. Assigning the values. Once the array has been defined, then we can store the elements inside the array by using index position as below. Syntax. Array name, index position, value. For example, customer codes of 0, like that. Done up to this array definitions? This point? Okay. We can retrieve the elements, array elements, by using the index position as below. Syntax, array name along with that index position. Customer code is, we can store that customer codes of 0. Customer codes of 1. Like that we can able to print each and every element. Done with these points? Now. So this is how we can able to define the arrays and we can able to manage the elements by using the help of index positions. How to do this one, we'll see practically in tomorrow's session. And then tomorrow we are going to start object-oriented programming. So we have to understand what exactly an object, what exactly a class, how to implement them. We'll see practically one by one. Okay? Now, thank you. Thanks for your time.